Hello and welcome to another session in social psychology. In this session, we are going to look at social perception, continue our discussion. And in this one, we are going to see how we perceive ourselves. In our previous discussions, we looked at how we perceive others, trying to explain others' behavior. Now the lens is on us. How do we explain our own behavior? Will be the main crux of what we look at in this session. So in this session, we are going to explain the process of self-perception. We are going to understand how the knowledge of ourselves aids in the formation of impressions. And we are going to look at this by looking at one of the main critical theories, the central trait theory, and see how we use these impressions in our relationship with others. First, forming impressions or creating and managing impressions with others. So we are going to look at these key issues: the social perception or self-perception, the central trait theory, impression formation, and impression management. Here again, chapter 3 of the required text to be very useful. So what is impression formation? Simply, it means the process. It refers to the process where we try to use diverse information about others into a unified impression about them. So you are not using just one bit of information, but you are using several pieces of information, what you call the thin slices. So you get a bit from this person, you get a bit from that source, you get a bit from here, you get a bit from that, and you put all the bits and pieces of information together to form a judgment about something, someone, or someplace. And we say that getting these judgments is a continuous process. So impression formation is a dynamic process. It is an integrative process. Integrative in the sense that each bit of information you get is interpreted within the context of other information that you have received. In other words, the information you have, the bits of information, will take their character from other bits. So somebody tells you, this woman is very intelligent. Another tells you, oh, she's overconfident. Another tells you, oh, she's arrogant. Another tells you, oh, but she's assertive. Put all of these together and make meaning out of it. You don't just dwell on one. And all of these help you to judge a person whom you want to know about, to form an impression about a person. One of the things that aids in impression formation, the theories, is the central trait theory. And this is a classic sociological theory formulated by Solomon Asch in 1946. And it's this old because it is classic, an initial theory that explains how people form impressions. In Asch's experiment, he presented two people to a group of people and tried to describe these personalities. He says that you are going to be addressed by two speakers. The first one is intelligent, skillful, industrious, warm, practical, and cautious. The other is intelligent, skillful, industrious, cold, practical, and conscious. Of these descriptions, two traits stand out: warm and cold. And obviously, when you are being told that whoever you are going to meet, one is warm and one is cold, those traits speak loudly than all the other traits. And these form the basis of the impressions you form about the other person. So that, for instance, if you are told that one person is warm, you are likely to also warm up towards that person. And if you are told that this person is cold, you are also likely to relate in a cold manner towards the person. So what are central traits? They are simply those traits that exert a disproportionate influence on people's overall impressions, causing them to assume the presence of other traits. So the fact that if somebody said that you are cold may presume that you are arrogant, you are selfish. They assume that some other traits are present. If you are described as warm, that central trait of warmth may suggest that you are friendly, you are likable, you are generous, and other positive traits that may be associated. So central traits are those traits that speak loud. And once they are present, we use them to infer that other traits may also be present. When we are forming impressions, we are not only looking at central traits. In addition to central traits, we also look out for the order in which we receive information. So here we are going to talk about the order effects in impression formation. Note that when we try to define the concept, we said it is a process that involves the receipt of several bits of information. So what it simply says is that the information does not come at once. Some come before others. So there is an order in the flow of information. And what is the effect of this order in the flow of information in the formation of impressions? We say that when the information comes first, it tends to bring about certain effects. And that first information, that primary information, generates effects that we call the primacy effect. I'm sure you have heard people say that first impressions last longer, and it's important to create very good positive first impressions, because for some people, that's what they always remember you for, right? So why would a person's impression of you be dependent on the first initial impressions? It's because of what is known as the primacy effect. And the primacy effect happens because of three reasons. It happens because of a change of meaning effect. What it means is that once people receive the first information, that information influences the interpretations they give to later information. So somebody tells you, oh, that's a rude person, right? If later you hear the person is confident, the person is rich, the person is beautiful, whatever, you say that, oh, the person is considered rude because of these other traits. That initial information colors any subsequent information you receive. The primacy effect also happens because of attention decrement. Often what happens is that once people get the first information they need, they pay less, their attention decreases. They pay less attention to subsequent information. So attention decrement. So perhaps you want to date a lady. All you want to know is whether she's available. And once you hear she's available, you don't want to hear any other thing of whether she's arrogant or she's from a poor home or from whatever. All you need to know is that she's available. Then lastly, the primacy effect occurs because of the discounting hypothesis. And this is where you discount information that does not agree with the initial information you receive. So if you receive a certain information about somebody, that the person is a rude person, and later you realize that the person is not rude, because you are tending to dwell on the initial information, even if you get subsequent evidence that suggests the person is not, because it's not in tandem with the initial information, you tend to discount the latter information. So the primacy effect would happen when these conditions are present, and people tend to form impressions based only on the first information they receive. But there are also instances where people form their impressions dwelling on the latter impressions, the latter information. And this is what we call the recency effect, the recent information. So the person may forget their initial encounter with you, or they may not even remember. And so when they don't, then they try to recall their most recent encounter with you and use that to form an impression about you. And so the recency effect is often used when people cannot remember their earlier interactions with a person, or when there's a time lag between when they have encountered you and when they have to make an assessment. Then people are likely to use the last information. For instance, if you have to do a lecturer evaluation, you may evaluate your lecturer based on your last encounter or your last lecture with the person, and not the initial sessions, because you may not remember the details of those first encounters. When you do that, we say your impression formation is being influenced by a recency effect. Now let's consider another subtopic in this whole impression formation process, self-perception. And the questions I would often ask here is whether you know yourself. Who are you? If I ask you who are you, you perhaps will tell me your name, your age, where you come from. But do you really know yourself that well? Can you predict the things you can do? Can you say that, as for me, I would never do this? Really? Sometimes we don't really know ourselves. And that is why sometimes we say that I was surprised at myself. I didn't know I could do this. I didn't know I had this skill. I didn't know I could act this way. So even though we say we can know ourselves to a very large extent, there is always that margin of error where we cannot really predict what we are capable of doing. But the portion where we can know ourselves, how do we know ourselves and understand ourselves? Because first you must know yourself to be able to know another. You must understand yourself to be able to understand another, to be able to relate with them in a social context. So how do we come to know ourselves? One of the basic ways is through introspection. Man, know thyself. And you can do that by looking inward, placing your own self under your own lens, and examining your own thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. Why am I scared when I'm going to go to work? Why am I scared when I'm going to encounter my new date? Right? So you are looking within yourself. Am I a shy person? Am I a timid person? Am I this? What are my strengths? When you place the lens on yourself, then you come to the fore. And introspection will then help you to discover yourself. So introspection aids in self-discovery. You come to know your own values, your own beliefs, your own emotions. Know yourself better to be able to tell others of who you are. So imagine you want to date somebody and subsequently even marry the person. How does the person tell you who they are, what their likes and dislikes are, if they themselves don't know themselves? So to a large extent, you must know yourself. And when you introspect, you are likely to come with two outcomes. You may like what you see about yourself, but sometimes you may not like what you see. After introspection, you may realize you're a lazy person. You may realize you're an insecure person. You may realize you're a shy person. And when you realize negative things about yourself, what do you do about it? You may take steps to improve these things that are bad, but for some people, they try to escape from themselves. The interesting question is, how do you escape from yourself when what you discover is not possible? People have tried to escape from themselves by resorting to spiritual or religious strategies. Others have tried to indulge in excesses or addictive behavior like alcoholism, trying to escape from themselves. What is important to note is that these escape routes are only temporary, and it may take you to a plane only for a while, and you come back to the reality of who you are. Then you can also know yourself by observing your own behavior. Sometimes you may not introspect, but you look at your behavior over a certain period. Every time I meet people, this is how I act. Does it then mean that this is who I am? Am I too sensitive? Am I assertive? Am I confident? So by observing your behavior with others across time, it helps you to know your attitudes, your feelings, and your own self. Observing your own behavior makes you come to know yourself. You can also know yourself by comparing yourself with others, right? So you can engage in social comparison. But what is important to note here is that with whom are you comparing yourself? And when do you compare yourself with others? In relation to the first question of when do you engage in social comparison, there is no standard. When there are standards, then you know that, yes, I'm comparing myself to this standard. But when there are no standards, then you have to examine your motive. Usually, you would compare yourself with others who are similar to you when you want an accurate assessment of yourself. So as I sit here, if I want to know whether I am doing well, then I should be comparing myself with people of my age, my contemporaries. If my contemporaries are achieving these or are doing these things, then I can know whether I'm also on track or whether I'm marking time or I'm lagging behind. Right? So if I want an accurate assessment of myself, I would compare myself with those of my equals. If I want to feel good about myself, I'll compare myself with those below me. So I would engage in a downward social comparison. So for instance, somebody of my status, I would be comparing myself to, say, a student in level 100. And I would say that, oh, I write better than a student in level 100. Of course, at this level, you should be writing better than a student in level 100. And so when that happens, then I'll be priding myself that, oh, I write better than a student in level 100. That's a downward social comparison, which makes you just feel good about yourself. And we do that even at the national level. Sometimes as a country, when we want to feel good about ourselves, then we compare ourselves to some war-stricken countries. Oh, look at this country. They have famine. Look at this country. They have war. We are better off, just to feel good about ourselves. But if you want to be motivated, to be pushed to achieve more, then you will engage in an upward social comparison, where you compare yourselves to those who are much better than you. So as a country, we would say that compared to some developed states like America or Britain, we have a long way to go as a nation. And that would engender you to do something. So you can know yourself by comparing yourself with others of the same caliber or below or above you, depending on what your motives are. You can also know yourself through others' lens, what others tell you about yourself. So others are kind of providing you with a looking glass through which you see yourself. What you believe you are most often comes from our parents and our friends and other significant others. When people tell you you are beautiful, you tend to think of yourself as beautiful. When people tell you are intelligent, that's how you tend to think of yourself. When people tell you you are stupid, you perhaps will be wondering, walking around feeling stupid, right? So what others tell you, looking at yourself through others' lens, right? Sometimes, and most times, or not sometimes, most times you come to know who you are through your peers. It's what your friends tell you. And sometimes they give you names, right? They are calling you Ahonfe Patri, oh, this and that. Then you start feeling that way and thinking of yourself that way because they are giving you names of, oh, the beauty queen, the this and that, and that and that. Through the lens of others, you come to know who you are. It's important to not only form the impressions, but after you formed it, manage it. So you give an impression, for instance, at the job interview, that you are well-spoken and you are well-traveled and you know the job. Finally, when you get into the job, are you able to maintain that impression? What do you need to do to manage impressions? So we say impression management is an attempt to get others to see you as you want to be seen. So if I want you to think of me as a friendly person, I'll come smiling, being generous, being helpful, because that is the impression I want to create. And I'm able to manage these impressions by using two strategies: self-enhancement and other enhancement. I would seek to self-enhance to manage impressions, or I would seek to enhance the others that I want to impress. Now let's take a moment to look at what self-enhancement involves and what other enhancement involves. Self-enhancement, one of the key strategies that is used is what is called self-handicapping. And self-handicapping is a strategy we use to protect our self-esteem by calling attention to the existence of potential causes of failure. So for instance, you are going to write an exam you know you have not prepared for, and you are likely to fail. The way to self-enhance, so that when you fail you will not look bad, is to self-handicap. So you perhaps would tell your family or your significant others, friends, that, oh, as for social psychology, it's not even a course I like. It's not even a course I'm interested in. It's not even a course I need. I have not even bothered to learn. I'm not even going to waste my time to answer the questions. You have self-handicapped so that when the results come and it's an F, you can say, I told you I wasn't even interested in it. Similarly, if you are interested in a lady and you are not sure that she's going to accept your proposal, you can self-handicap, right, before you even go to speak to her. You can tell your friends, oh, this lady, I don't really like her. I'm just going to play with her. So you watch me. I'll just go and play around with her and come back. So that when you go and the lady tells you, get off my back, I'm not interested, then you can come and tell your friends, oh, I just didn't, you know, I told you I was just going to play with her. So that you can keep your self-esteem intact. But besides self-handicapping to self-enhance, you can also engage in other enhancements. And other enhancements you can do by using the strategy of ingratiation. And this is where people try to flatter and praise another person, usually one of a higher status, so that they will look good in the person's eye. So for instance, you can come up to me after a class to say that, oh, Dr. Tete, I really like your lectures. I like the way you teach. In fact, I enjoyed your last lecture. I like the examples you gave, just to make me feel good about myself. And in the process of making me feel good, I would then think highly of you. But this can backfire if it is not sincere. So for instance, you come to me with all of these good words, and then I ask you, so which of the examples from the last lecture did you like? And you cannot give me because, in fact, you were not at the last lecture. When that happens, instead of me having a positive impression of you, I would rather have a negative impression of you. And then when that happens, we say that the slime effect has happened. Your ingratiation has backfired, producing a slime effect. So instead of thinking positively of you, my impressions of you rather become negative. Why do we need to manage impressions? Impression management has benefits for the person who is seeking to manage impressions. One of the basic benefits is that he helps to boost your mood, right? I imagine that many of us, before we leave home, look in the mirror. We want to see how we look. How are we looking in our clothes? How is our face looking? How is our hair looking? They are all strategies to create positive impressions, right? And once you create positive impressions and others like you, you yourself start liking yourself. If you try to appear happy in order to create a good impression, you perhaps will start feeling happy. And that is what is called the facial feedback hypothesis. What you put on your face, on the external, has the tendency to influence the internal. So if you want to appear happy on the face, there is the possibility that you start feeling happy. The facial feedback hypothesis. So it has positives for the person who tries to manage impression. It enhances your moods and makes you appear as a very positive person. So consider these questions. First impressions last long. Is it true? Which of these theories would explain this basis? And if you have a contrary opinion, which of what we have said so far can you use in your reasoning? This session has sought to explain the concept and the process of self-perception. And we have said that you can know yourself through introspection, through the views of others. And all of these cumulatively help you to know yourself. And it's important to know yourself so you can relate with others. And after you've come to know yourself, it's important to also form positive impressions. And not only form them, but also be able to manage them using the appropriate strategies. And you must be careful that these strategies do not backfire, because impression management is very key in our relationships and in interactions with others. As sociologists, we say that the world is a stage, and we are all actors on this stage. We are acting out on the front stage to create and manage impressions, and at the backstage, we can afford to be ourselves. So I hope you would not only learn this for academic purposes, but you try it in your relationships in various other contexts. Thank you.